It was late evening in New York City. The streets shimmered under neon signs, the kind of night where everyone seemed to be rushing somewhere except for him. Alexander Grant, CEO of one of the largest real estate empires in the country, sat alone in the back of his black limousine, scrolling aimlessly through emails he didn't want to read. The city outside buzzed with life, but inside that leather-seated car, silence and emptiness pressed down heavier than the traffic. He had everything money could buy: a penthouse in Manhattan, a villa in the south of France, luxury cars he rarely drove. Yet, in that moment, Alexander realized he had no one waiting for him at home. Wealth had given him power, but it had quietly stolen away his humanity. Until that night. That was the night he heard a small, trembling voice on the sidewalk whisper, "I just want milk for my brother." A chance encounter. The limousine slowed at a red light. Alexander leaned back, ready to close his eyes, when movement on the corner caught his attention. A little girl, no more than 9, stood by the entrance of a small grocery store. She wasn't begging for money, not in the loud, desperate way he'd seen on city streets. Instead, she clutched a small coin purse, her eyes wide, her clothes too thin for the autumn chill. Alexander rolled down the tinted window just enough to hear. "Please, sir," she whispered to a passerby. "I just want milk, a broken bar for my baby brother. He's hungry." Most people brushed past her, muttering excuses. Some didn't even look at her. The girl bit her lip, glanced back toward the alley behind the store, and held onto that little purse as if it carried her whole world. Alexander's driver glanced in the rearview mirror. "Sir, should we stop the car?" Alexander said, his voice unusually firm. The driver hesitated. "It's not a Safia." "Stop the car." The limousine pulled over. Alexander stepped out into the cool night, his expensive shoes clicking against the sidewalk. The little girl looked up, startled, but she didn't run. Instead, she held her ground, clutching that purse tighter. First words. "Why milk?" Alexander asked softly, towering over her but trying not to frighten her. Her big brown eyes lifted to his. "Because my brother's too little for bread. Mom has a broken bar, she's sick. We just need milk, that's all." Her voice cracked at the word sick. Alexander felt something stir inside him, a tug, faint but sharp, as though someone had knocked gently on the doors of his heart. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking, but for the first time in years, he was speechless. "What's your name?" he asked. "Leela." "Leela," he repeated, the name settling on his tongue like something he had almost forgotten. Innocence. "The store." "Come," he said, gesturing toward the grocery store. Leela hesitated. "I only have $3. Alexander almost laughed, not at her, but at the absurdity of it. $3 in his world couldn't even buy a cup of coffee at his office cafe. Copyright. Yet here it was, her entire fortune. "You'll need more than that," he said quietly. "Let's go inside." They entered the store together, and the cashier eyed them curiously. Alexander picked up a basket. "Show me," he told Leela. She guided him timidly to the dairy aisle, where she reached for the smallest carton of milk. "This one," she said. "It's enough." He gently took it from her and replaced it with a full gallon. Then he started filling the basket: bread, eggs, peanut butter, soup cans, fresh fruit. Leela's eyes widened with every item. "That's too much," she whispered, almost panicked. "Not for a growing brother," Alexander said. "What's his name?" "Ethan." "He's 3. When they reached the checkout counter, Leela clutched his sleeve. "Please, sir, I don't want trouble, just milk. They'll think I'm stealing." Alexander's chest tightened. "You're not stealing, Leela. You're helping your family, and I'm just a broken bar helping you." He paid without hesitation, pulling out a black card that made the cashier's eyebrows rise. Leela held the grocery bag carefully, almost reverently, as though it were made of gold. "The alley." "Where do you live?" Alexander asked. Leela pointed toward a narrow alley a block away. He followed, his driver trailing nervously behind. The alley led to a small basement apartment with a broken door frame. Inside, the air smelled of damp concrete and faint medicine. A woman lay on a worn-out couch, her skin pale, her breath shallow. "Mama," Leela whispered, setting the bag down. "We got milk." The woman opened her eyes weakly, smiled at her daughter, then noticed Alexander standing in the doorway. Her expression shifted to alarm. "Whoa," she coughed. "Who are you?" Alexander stepped forward, his voice gentle. "Just someone who wanted to help." The little boy, Ethan, peeked out from under a blanket. His cheeks were sunken, but his eyes shone as he reached for the milk carton. Leela poured it into a small cup, handed it to her brother, and Alexander watched as the boy drank greedily, his tiny hands shaking. That simple act, a child drinking milk, made Alexander's throat tighten in a way boardroom victories never had. A forgotten past. That night, Alexander couldn't sleep. Back in his glass-walled penthouse, overlooking the glittering city, the image of Leela's eyes haunted him. For the first time in years, he remembered being 6 years old, clutching his little sister's hand in a rundown apartment in Chicago. Their mother had worked double shifts to buy milk, and their father had disappeared long before. He remembered the hunger, the helplessness, and then he remembered the day his mother died, young, overworked, alone, leaving him to grow up faster than any child should. That was the day he swore he'd never be powerless again. He would earn enough to escape poverty, to bury the memory of milk cartons and empty cupboards, and he had succeeded. But in his hunger for wealth, he had lost something greater, compassion, until Leela reminded him. The decision. The next morning, Alexander cancelled his meetings, a move that shocked his assistants. Instead, he returned to that basement apartment. The mother, whose name was Grace, sat up weakly, embarrassed by the state of her home. "You didn't have to come back," she said softly. "I did," Alexander replied, "because last night, I realized I've been running from who I used to be, and your children a broken bar, they reminded me what matters." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "We've had a rough year. I lost my job when I got sick. The rent, a broken bar, we're months behind." Alexander's jaw tightened. He thought of his empire of luxury apartments, hundreds sitting empty while families like this suffered. In that moment, a decision formed inside him. Not a business decision, but a human one. A twist of fate. Alexander arranged for Grace and her children to move into one of his company's newly renovated apartments, rent-free. He paid for Grace's medical treatment and set up a trust for Leela and Ethan's future. But he didn't stop there. Inspired by that single request, "I just want milk for my brother," Alexander launched a new foundation through his company. Its mission was simple: provide food, housing, and dignity to struggling families. Investors scoffed at first. "It's charity, not business," they said. But Alexander only smiled. "Sometimes the best investment isn't in property, it's in people." The foundation grew rapidly, fueled by Alexander's wealth and surprisingly the support of communities across the country. Emotional climax. Months later, at the opening of a new community center funded by the foundation, Alexander stood at the podium. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes, but he barely noticed them. His eyes were on the front row, where Leela sat proudly beside her mother and Ethan. When it was his turn to speak, Alexander's voice shook. "Not long ago," he began, "a little girl stopped me on the street. She wasn't asking for money, or toys, or anything for herself. She only wanted milk, a broken bar for her brother." The audience quieted. That moment reminded me of something I had forgotten. What it feels like to be hungry, to feel powerless. And it reminded me that money, no matter how much you have, cannot buy compassion. It cannot buy humanity. But it can be used to help. He paused, his gaze falling on Leela. "That little girl changed my life. And today, I want to dedicate this century broken bar to her courage." The crowd erupted in applause. Grace wept silently, and Leela, cheeks flushed, beamed at him with the kind of gratitude that words could never capture. Conclusion message. Years later, people would remember Alexander Grant not just as a powerful CEO, but as the man who turned skyscrapers into shelters, profits into purpose, and loneliness into legacy. But for Alexander himself, the greatest reward wasn't the recognition. It was the small moments, like walking into the community center one evening and hearing Ethan, now healthy and laughing, call out, "Uncle Alex," before running into his arms. In those arms, Alexander held something he had never been able to buy: family. And it had all begun with a little girl's trembling voice on a cold New York night, whispering words that changed everything. "I just want milk for my brother."